Welcome to The Chat. Come behind the inbound scenes of some of the world's fastest growing companies. For the past 10 years as Chatmetrics, we've had an exclusive inside view of how these industry leaders are revolutionising inbound marketing and sales across diverse sectors. Each week, we bring you conversations with top minds in marketing and sales who share insider secrets and strategies for driving inbound success. Join us on The Chat, your front row seat to the future of inbound. So today we're joined by someone who lives at the intersection of copy and conversions, Christine Gomolka. She started her career in the trenches of B2B software sales, cold calling school districts and grinding through pipeline pressure, before making a bold pivot into copywriting, where she quickly became known for her cold email strategies that actually worked. Since then, she's written for enterprise tech companies, launched her own copy education business, and built a name mentoring freelancers on how to sell, market, and land high-value clients as a brand messaging strategist. In a world where AI is flooding inboxes with spammy outreach and budgets are tighter than ever, Christine brings a refreshing mix of empathy, clarity, and a strategic punch. Today, we're going to unpack what really makes copy convert and how to get messaging right. And the one big idea that could transform your website from a bounce machine to a conversion engine. Let's get into it. Welcome to The Chat, Christine. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Okay, so look, and rather than getting into too much background, I want to jump straight into one question and then I'll come back and ask you about a transition. But I really want to talk about websites. What's the number one thing that you would say that most SaaS companies are getting wrong on their homepage?
The number one thing I see with software as a service, which is where I've done the most of my messaging work and copywriting, is that it's that hook. And that's where people struggle the most. It's that above the fold introduction or hook. And I find with SaaS companies specifically, it's either jargony to the sense where it makes sense to their internal marketing team. Maybe it makes sense within their industry, but to somebody who doesn't know what they do and they get on the page, it sounds great, but they don't know what it does. And because I use something called the story brand framework, we know from a messaging standpoint that if somebody doesn't understand what a company does within 5 seconds of first visiting that page, their brain is exhausting too many calories and they just click off. So you don't want people to have to decode or decipher what it is your product does and how it helps them. So that's number one, is just the jargon, the shiny sounding headline or tagline. And then the other issue is just being way too focused on them and their brand and who they are. And I see that more with small to mid-sized businesses. With the big enterprise SaaS company to be too slick, too creative to the point where we don't understand what you do. Then for small to mid-sized businesses, it's like too self-centered. And that's what I really help companies do is, yes, let's learn about you and your company and what you do, but let's translate that message into how it actually impacts the prospect or the website visitor so that they want to go deeper and keep scrolling on your website.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the number one thing, most important, and that most get wrong is the hook. And then secondly, it's actually talking about themselves. Let's pause those because I'll come back and dig right into those. But to move back on now then to a little bit about where you started. You've gone from B2B tech sales, which has given you a great foundation and understanding for that whole sales process and understanding the customers, to a brand messaging strategist. What was the moment where you realized brand messaging was your superpower?
It's interesting because I segued from being a B2B salesperson into copywriting, and copywriting, being a freelancer and working on a contract basis for so many different companies. What I noticed the biggest problem or through line was that, yes, people were assigning me work and saying, write this for me, write this email, write this blog post. But without a streamlined core message, that work wasn't performing. So I'd either get people coming to me saying, "Hey, we need blog posts." And then I would take it a step back and say, "Okay, but do you know what you even want to say? Because if this isn't all adding up and if this isn't strategic, we're going to be publishing blogs. And that's great for me because I'm going to get paid. But if it's not driving traffic to your site, I don't want to do it." After having so many of those meetings where I'm like, back up, you need to get someone to streamline your message before we start creating content. I moved into that role more naturally where I was like, let me just help you flesh out what your message actually is. And then we can write content. And then you can hire a whole team that's going to write your content. And you're all going to be singing off the same hymn sheet.
I'm sitting here nodding, smiling, and feeling quite embarrassed as I think about what the hook is on our spread on our website at the moment on our homepage, and it's something that we'll be going through. But and it at least I can say that it is probably aligned to most of the content that we're doing. I'm in control of most of it, so there's continuity there. But it's probably not saying the right thing in terms of what it needs to from a client's perspective. Was there any particular thing that you noticed, or was there ever any resistance you had as you're trying to take that step back from, okay, write a blog to hang on, there's a bigger picture that's missing here? Was there something from the client's perspective that was causing that disconnect?
Yeah. So if we're just sticking with SaaS examples, I would say the two biggest points of pushback I get is that there's a marketer or a CEO when I tell them, hey, we need to sit back and do this strategy work before we start producing blogs. It wasn't what they necessarily wanted to hear because they heard from somewhere, hey, we need to start publishing blogs. And they just want to do the activity, even if it means not getting the result because they were so fixated on, hey, we just want this deliverable. So that's always going to be an issue. There's writers who are just going to take that business and say, you tell me to write it and I will do it. But in my opinion, that's how you get replaced, because if the content isn't working or performing, you're eventually going to be out of a job anyway. So I don't like to do that. And then the second, I would say, point of pushback for SaaS specifically, because I've worked with so many enterprise companies, is that marketing teams within SaaS companies can be very bloated. There is a demand gen team, there is a content marketing team, there's an inbound team, an SDR team, and the message and getting those departments on the same page can be really tough. So when I come in and I'm talking to a CMO and I'm talking about messaging, but the website is created entirely by the demand gen team, that disconnect and those silos makes it nearly impossible for me to actually penetrate the company and get in there and get everything streamlined. So those are just some of the challenges I see specifically with these like large organizations when it comes to messaging.
There's 2 points I'll take away from what you've said. The first one was the fact, and I think it's why you and I kicked off so well, clicked so well when we first chatted, was that we both have a focus on delivering value. We'll walk away from a job rather than take it, knowing that it's not really going to deliver the right outcome for a client. So that kudos to you for that. I think there's plenty that don't. Let's just leave it there. As far as the second point around silos, it is incredible. One of the things that we see often when we first start up with a client, it'll be that our touch point to start with is the marketing team. They own the website generally, but we act as an extension to the sales team. And so we're operating under sales as well. So we've got this two-way conversation going. And I've literally sat in meetings where you can see the friction in the air. You could cut the air with a knife between the sales leader and the marketing leader as we're having the conversations about the leads that are coming and doing some of the preparation work. But it's so delightful to see over time that as the sales guys are seeing the outcome, or the sales team seeing the outcome of what marketing is now built in terms of taking on board our services, that you see that friction start to disappear and there's a much closer working together, so to speak, and those silos start to come down. Have you seen something similar with what you do as you're starting to work across a client and then start to bring the messaging through all the way? And I guess I should ask then, how do you manage those projects? Do you run them and communicate across the entire business, or do you facilitate somebody else to do that? What's your mode of operation?
Yeah, it really depends how much access my client is going to give me to people internally in the company. I've had clients, mostly content marketers and chief marketing officers are who contracts me. And sometimes they'll be like, hey, get on a call with our CEO and interview him, get on a call with our customer success manager or whatever and interview him. Other times they're more organized in the sense that they have recorded interviews, they have everything compiled for me. So it's a matter of me just sitting there reading it. So it's interesting. I work with so many different scenarios in terms of the content marketer that's very dialed in. He has all the information compiled in spreadsheets and I'm just consuming the information. Sometimes I have to get scrappy and get on calls and actually interview people myself. And sometimes the information just doesn't exist. And I have to look at competitors. I have to go deep in whatever forums people are voicing their pain points and desires and do all that work, that legwork just independently of them. And that all depends on just what's going on internally in a company and what they have already in terms of resources and assets.
And initiatives. Often there'll be other projects that they're working on that's taking up all of their resources at the time.
And it's going to get easier though for content marketers as time goes by. I'm actually in a beta testing group right now with a software that compiles voice of customer with the click of a button. It'll scrape, which Terry, this would be great for you and I to have a side conversation about because it literally scrapes a company's entire online presence, all of their G2 reviews, everything that can be found about a company, it'll scrape it and put it into a voice of customer doc so that you can really see like pain points, desires, why someone chose to work with a company, objections, all that good stuff. And it's like click of a button. AI is a whole conversation in and of itself, but that stuff's becoming way more accessible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you, if marketers are trying to drive pipeline today, and this is getting back onto the first question again, but aside from the hook, obviously because people land and they see that hook and then consistency as the first thing, where's the next biggest mistake as far as the copy or the overall messaging in the website is concerned?
Are we still on the website or more just because there's so many issues I can go into? Are we talking about messaging in general? Are we talking about converting leads? Talking about website?
Let's go back firstly to the website and let's talk about the hook. What you mentioned that the hook has to be clear. Can you give us your framework or steps through in terms of what it is that makes an ideal hook for a website?
Yeah. So I use something called the Story Brand Framework by Donald Miller. It's great for small to medium sized businesses. I wish more enterprise software companies were using it because then they wouldn't have those generic above the fold hooks that are more sounding like brand taglines, Nike just do it versus we want to get signups for our software. But in the story brand framework, step one is a character or the hero. And what the hero is just identifying who your target audience is and what their primary desire is. In other words, what they want, what they're looking for. And people get this wrong, meaning software companies, SaaS companies, tech companies, they get this wrong because they think we're the hero. Like so-and-so.com, I'm the character, I'm the hero, and this is what we do. The hero is the customer. The hero, in order for them to enter the story that you're going to tell, they have to see themselves and their journey. So by identifying who that person is and what their desire is, that's what makes a compelling hook. And it has to be pretty simple to the extent where you're like, this isn't very impressive. And that's what a lot of marketers and even founders might get a little bit hung up on as well. This doesn't sound slick or smart, but simplicity always wins in these situations because, again, we want people to understand what you do and keep scrolling onto the next section of the page. So the other big pushback or the other issue that happens with above the fold is that they want to speak to multiple target personas. So when I get with a CEO or founder and I say, who is your one target persona and their one desire? That's a very complex conversation because a lot of businesses serve multiple verticals. They serve multiple customer avatars, and boiling that down into one person for that homepage becomes very difficult because they're like, there's so many people, but your website can speak to multiple people, just not in that above the fold. So that's why if anyone's listening to this and you're like, oh, that's my problem. Yes, that's all of our problem. It's hard for every single one of us. And that's why you have to bring someone in from the outside who's unbiased, who's going to give you those edits, because even my marketing coach, because I sell and market my own products, it's the same conversation every time I submit my landing page, submit my homepage to her. She'll say, I really like this tagline, but is this what your customer really wants? Is this how they would phrase it? And I always have her voice in the back of my head when I'm writing copy to be like, yes, I like the way this sounds, but is this what they really want? Is this what they're looking for?
I'm beginning to hate this conversation.
Well,
I want to go and take my website down immediately.
I know it can be like convicting and confronting and like shots fired, but it's the hardest part for everyone. It really is. And that's why if you talk to any copywriter, they'll tell you they'll start with something up there above the fold. They'll write the entire page, but then they come back to the above the fold and continue to tweak and revise because that's hook writing, whether it's an email subject line, whether it's the title of a blog post, it's the hardest part and it requires the most work.
I think it would be easier if I didn't believe you already know what you're telling me. I realized that for us in particular, I've got a fancy hook on there that was really tried to grab some curiosity and some intrigue, but that's not the place to be doing that. I need to do that through the messaging to get people to come to the homepage. The homepage needs to be telling them of what their problems are that we solve and who we solve them for. Really, that's in essence.
And you know what? It's A/B testing, right? Because I can have the best assumption of what I think your above the fold should be, but unless you're testing it and seeing what converts, none of it matters. So that's the thing about marketing is that it's not just like one guru out there is like a marketing genius. It's just somebody who literally A/B tested and saw for themselves what had the highest conversion rate.
For themselves in their market.
Yeah, it's a total experiment.
So the story brand framework, you've spoken about that component. Do you want to run us through the whole framework and tell us how you leverage that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give a quick rundown of the story brand framework. Read Donald Miller's book. You can even get certified as like a story brand guide, but I didn't want to invest $10,000 in that certification because I can just do it for clients. But it's a character first of all, let me explain to you the basis of the story brand framework to understand why it matters. So Donald Miller, before he became a marketer, was like a novelist and a screenwriter. And what he discovered was that there's a reason why we get sucked into movies, right? We're all having these short attention spans. We have the TikTok brain. But if we go to the right movie that hooks us, we are zoned in for 3 hours without looking at our phone and we're lost. Like we lose sense of ourselves and we're sucked in. And as marketers and business owners, we want people to stay on our websites, to keep reading whatever we sent them, to grab their attention. So he took that concept of what makes a movie or a story captivating and interesting, and how do we infuse that into a marketing message, right? And story is something that's very primal to humans, to our psychology. That's what we were doing when we were dancing around like a fire as cavemen. And storytelling, before we had writing, before we had the printing press, that was our most primal way of consuming information and passing on information. So that's what this framework is based off of. And I like that because it's with marketing and sales, there's always something new. There's always something trendy. There's always spin selling, challenge selling, this. But if you can really know the basics and what triggers people psychologically, you'll always be doing something right and getting results. So that's why I gravitate towards Donald Miller's marketing framework. And he breaks it down in this 7-part framework. And this is also how I model a customer or a client's homepage. So it's a character. That's step one. That's what we talked about, where it's who are you talking to and what do they want? And then number 2 is their problem, right? External, internal, philosophical, depends what industry you're in terms of problems. In marketing, we call it pain points. And the reason why pain points are so important and problems are so important in sales and marketing is because we don't do anything unless we are prompted by pain. That's just the reality, right? Like we like homeostasis. We like things the way they are. And the only time we are prompted to take an action or make a big change is because it hurts in some way, right? I'm going to try to lose weight because not just, oh, I want to lose weight. It's, I don't want to look bad in photos anymore. I don't want to be embarrassed of myself in a bathing suit. There's problems that prompt us to buy things, to change things, to read things, all of that stuff.
Did you pick that particular topic for some reason? Might show me a little bit too much.
Actually, I'm in the middle of a weight loss journey. I am down 6.4 pounds and I have 5 pounds to go. And for me, I think looking at how weight loss programs and nutritionists and trainers, how they market themselves is very enlightening, right? I always look at other industries that have nothing to do with what I'm doing to pick up tips and say, oh, that's really good the way they did that. So no, it's nothing to do with you. It's everything to do with me.
Okay, well, congratulations on that achievement. And that, just as a quick aside, that's a very valid point in that I've recently spoken with Juliana, who was on the website this week, actually, just been published. And she's from B2C. She's from brands, big brands. And she's moved into a business to business. And the insights that she's bringing from consumer brands into a business to business is very interesting. That being able to look outside of the box that you're in at the moment, I think the insights you can gain from that are incredible.
Yes. And I love that because I think the way things are moving is that B2B is going to start acting more B2C as things get quicker and as sales processes accelerate, which I'm sure because being in the chat bot, having that face-to-face human to human interaction, it's not, I would say B is shifting to a more B2C like sales and marketing process, but that's like a whole other episode. But okay, step 3 is meets a guide. So that's where you position your business as the person or the product or the solution that can help them. So that's where things like your testimonials, your case studies, right? It's all about proving like, hey, I know who you are and what you want. Here's your problem, right? We agitate their problem and then we position ourselves as the guide, the person who knows how to solve their problem and who they should trust to guide them on that journey. Step 4 is gives them a plan. Gives them a plan is any website you go to and it'll say, here's how you do business with us. Step 1, fill out our form. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. If you can break out your entire process into 3 to 4 steps and summarize them, what it does psychologically is it bridges the gap between them not knowing how you can help them or what that process will look like to them having a sense of safety and predictability. Oh, okay, when I click that call to action button, I'm going to be led to a form and I'm eventually going to get on a call with somebody. Believe it or not, that's really important for somebody who's just on your website and you're wanting to keep them there. You're wanting them to actually click the buttons, click those calls to action. They need to know what comes next. And that's another issue that I have with a lot of clients, is that getting them to summarize their process into 3 to 4 steps when they say, no, Christine, we have a very lengthy process and we do this and we do that, like, especially in the IT space, they'll be like, we need this evaluation. And I'm like, no, we need to keep it simple just for this page. Okay. So then number 5 is
Just as a point there as well, it's interesting that nearly every single, not 100%, but close to it, of the clients that we talk to all say, but our service, our offering is so complicated, you'll never be able to provide the service. You'll never be able to learn about our product. They all say the same thing to start with. And it's really interesting that you're talking about breaking it down to a simple couple of steps so that the website visitor or prospect, really your potential client, can get their head from their pain being unsolved at the moment to, it's not a huge project, it's only a few small steps to get to a point where it could be having this problem solved. I think that's very
exactly.
interesting. Yeah, we'll talk after this.
Yes. Yeah. And what you said exactly, for someone to be like, our program is so complicated, you'll never be able to explain it. Don't let the customer know that. Okay. We don't want the customer to think that there's any complexity. We want them to think it's very easy, which is the value in that. So the call to action. So again, calls to action are an art form in and of itself, just like hook writing. People tend to go 2 ways. It's way too bland, or it's so creative where we're like, what is going to happen when I click that button? So it really just has to blend in with the rest of the page. It could be something as simple as book a call, download a free guide, but we want those calls to action strategically placed throughout a homepage or a landing page, so that at any given moment when they are triggered at any point in that page, they're able to click and get to where they want to go. Number 6, step 6, is ends in success. So that's when you describe the positive outcome that your customer is going to get once they've undergone the transformation. In marketing, we'll call that like painting a picture of their future, where they can step into that vision of, what does my life look like once I pursue their services? I get the desired outcome that we opened all this up with. What does my life look like? And when you can paint that picture for them, it's very compelling, because that's really why they're there. They're not there to do business with your lovely company. They're there to solve their problem and get to that end goal and vision. And then step 7 is help them avoid failure, right? That is where you highlight the negative consequences of them not doing business with you and them not taking action. So we talked about that before. Here's the problem. Here's why it hurts. But here's also what's going to happen if you don't take action. So I know in like the coaching world, or whether you're selling education products, we'll say things like, if you just keep going with what you're doing today, where are you going to be a year from now? So you don't take any action, even if you're in fitness or weight loss or consumer fitness, that this could be a helps them avoid failure section. Okay, so keep doing what you're doing today. You're spinning in circles. You're not losing weight. You keep binge eating. You keep keeping your step count below 5,000. What does that look like a year from now if you don't do anything about that problem? So not only do you paint a successful future if they do business with you, but you press urgency by saying, this is how bad the problem can get if you don't do something about this today, because we all need a little bit of a push, a little bit of that urgency. So that is the 7-part story brand framework.
Thank you. Enlightening. It's very interesting. We talk about pain and moving towards an outcome. It's from a psychological perspective, really, it's pain and pleasure, isn't it? We'll move towards pleasure and away from pain. That's just the natural direction we'll move in. But I think the reality is with human beings that we will run away from pain and only walk towards pleasure. We've heard too many promises in the past that haven't necessarily been fulfilled or haven't taken all the right steps to achieve. But if there's pain there, then we want to get away from that pretty quickly. And so we'll take the steps faster to avoid the pain. And I think that's been one of the challenges in messaging that I've seen over the last 2 years, particularly in the tech space. You mentioned the pain points. Everyone seems to drill in so deeply and twist the knife so deeply in the pain points. I think sometimes you forget that, it's a sprinkling. It depends more about the level of awareness that client is of their problem, or that prospect is of their problem, compared to how much educating or twisting the knife you need to do about. They know they've got it, then it's more about the solution. If they don't know they've got it, then obviously it's more about the problem. There's a lot of nuances, I think, when it comes to, and that's, you mentioned before, the importance of digging right down into and understanding that voice of customer and your buyer, that buyer's profile, and researching and understanding who it is that you're actually talking to, who your audience is, who's that ideal client profile. And
Well,
as
yeah,
it's up to,
and understanding where they are in their buying process and creating content and messaging that hits them at every part of the funnel, because you're right. Somebody at the top of funnel is not going to have the same pain points, desires necessarily as somebody who's on the edge of pulling the trigger and they're at the bottom of the funnel. So that's the other part of it too, that the nuance.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I feel that you might just say to me, look, it's the same as I answered before. But if someone has only time to rewrite one section of their website this week, where should they focus for maximum impact?
What problem are they having most? I would ask. Okay, so if it's just a client coming to me saying if I could just change one part of my website, what would it be? I would have to know what part of your
Conversions. Conversions. They've got
version.
traffic coming,
Okay.
but they're not converting. Because that's the biggest challenge for, I think, for most marketers. If they've got a budget and they're doing activities, we'll talk about budget. Even those organizations that are only doing cold outbound and not doing any marketing at all have website visitors. As soon as somebody reaches out, they're reaching out to their ideal client profile. Now, in that audience will be everybody from those ready to buy that have got the pain to completely unaware and happy on the journey they're on at the moment. But the ones that are interested and have enough curiosity to actually check you out, the first place they go to is check your LinkedIn personally or check your website for the offer. We're sitting on clients that have got 200 and 300 visitors a month and delivering 10, 15 leads a month out of their ICP. They're only doing outbound, but it's only their ICP that's coming to their website. We've got other clients, we're sitting on 350, 400,000 visitors a month and delivering 50 or 60 leads because they've had this whole SEO campaign go that's driving a big chunk of traffic, which is great. But as far as their ICP, it's only a very small percentage of that overall traffic. So I know that's a little bit of a digression, but I think that if, assuming all things being equal, that it's a marketing campaign, they've been running good SEO, they've got decent organic traffic as well as some paid traffic coming through, the majority of their traffic is coming from the right sources. Their bounce rates are reasonable, 35%. It's not like people are spending 2 seconds on the website and running away. What would you say would be the one thing that they should be focused on in terms of getting a conversion to get people to take that final step and actually take an action?
I would say the problem section of the website, which is just below the fold, right? So we talked a lot about why that hook is so important and it allows the prospect to see themselves in the story and kind of register that they're in the right place. But let's say, like you said, they're in a campaign, they got a direct message, they got an outbound message, and there's other signals that brought them to this page to let them know that they were in the right place. If they can see that you directly solve their problem and they can see themselves and hear themselves in the way you articulate the problem, that can remedy a horrible tagline or a horrible hook, because they're like, okay, I don't really understand what this first line means. But once they get to the problem section and said, are you struggling with this? It will, I would say, pique their curiosity enough where they'll take you up on your call to action. Oh, yes, I have that problem. I'll download that free guide or I'll book this call.
Because that's really getting to the crux of the matter, isn't it? The reason they're there is because they're trying to solve a problem.
Exactly, exactly. And I would just say that in marketing in general, when we hear people articulate our problems in the same way that we are voicing those problems, it captures us immediately. It makes us listen up. Yeah, that is what I'm struggling with. I don't know why that is, but once we feel understood in that way by the company, everything else can be forgiven, if that makes sense.
Look, I think that's true. I call it being heard. You understand my position. It's a lesson I had very early on from my father. He always used to say to me, son, before you try and convince anybody to do anything, walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great lesson for anyone in the sales profession is listening is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, of the out of the story brand process, how long does it usually take once you've completed a project, so to speak, and made the adjustments to messaging? How quickly do you start to see results?
With my clients, I'm typically brought in on the front end, then they move on to working with a web designer. So, are you talking about from the time the copy goes live?
Live, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So it's like you've obviously will come and put together the entire strategy, the overall branding and messaging. All of that then has to be executed. From point of execution, how quickly do you start to see results?
It really depends on what the client's strategy is, right? Because it depends how they're driving traffic. If they actually have an outbound sales motion, it could be within days, weeks. If they're relying on SEO and blogs, that is a long play. That could take 6 months to a year to really ramp up and be generating consistent traffic. So, me fleshing out their message and getting that core brand messaging script, we'll call it. That's one part of an entire ecosystem. It's really what the client does with that message next. It's okay, so how many people in the organization are going to get that script so they can start changing how they talk about the company? The social media manager needs it. The demand gen team who's writing the email campaigns, they need this messaging. Even customer service or sales reps, they need that messaging as well. So I would just say it so highly depends. And it's also a lot out of my control as a contractor because it's what the company does with that messaging that ultimately matters most.
I get it. I get it. It's really about it's on them to execute and their particular channels and overall marketing strategy.
Exactly. Or else it's just words on a page at the end of the day. It's once you have the words on the page, you have to be generating traffic and actually get those words the visibility. And that's where all these other marketing channels come into play.
So, in your experience with the clients you've worked with, how much of poor performance is bad copy versus a poor offer?
Poor performance in what sense? Like disappointing sales or like lack of conversions with leads?
Lack of conversions, I guess, again, that's the point that I'll always focus on getting someone that's you've invested all of the time, energy, and resources into coming to a website, to consuming your content, to getting to a point where this is now where they should click that button and book a meeting, or when they should. So I'm actually talking about getting them into the pipeline, whether they're a prospect. You, how much in your experience is copy issue versus an offer issue? You can have the best copy in the world to get people to convert. But if you've got a bad offer, they're not going to turn into sales. I guess the question for me, is there a point where, look, have you had an experience where, look, this business, this offer really is just not, there's no demand for it, I guess is the way to point it. You can't start a business and sell where there's no demand. You can't create demand as much as we talk about demand gen and demand creation. It's more demand diversion. There has to be a problem that people want solved. And they're solving another way at the moment, whether it's with spreadsheets or rubber bands or duct tape, and you've got a different solution, you're really diverting that demand. So there are some offers and products, obviously, there's not a lot of demand for. Have you had any experience with those?
Yeah, it's hard to tell from my end because what's interesting is that I find that a bad offer with the right message can still make a lot of traction. And in the SaaS world specifically, because I've worked with like early stage startups, they iterate as they get into these customers and find out what they like. And then it really becomes a matter of how do we retain these customers? Like, at what point can we nurture them more so that they're not canceling their subscription. So like I work with a lot of businesses that have a subscription model. So I don't know, I guess I'm biased, but I see everything through a messaging standpoint because there's great products out there, but if the messaging isn't there, a lot of people won't use it. Whereas there's not great products out there that are mediocre, but because they have this s- following or great branding or the right message, they catch on and they're profitable and they grow their customer base. So I'm of the belief that the right messaging to the right person at the right time matters more than you having the best thing on the block.
I'm 100% aligned. In my experience, and I've got a little bit of gray in my beard now, I've seen it where a good marketer will outsell a good product any day of the week, any day of the week. We've seen even in our industry some amazing things that I've watched from afar and seen how the growth has been skyrocketing. Valuations are skyrocketing. And then I look and see where things settled today, and it's what a disaster. It was actually the product itself initially was very good, but then it iterated into something that was quite terrible to the extent where the original founders, at the point in time that they exited, everything was good, but then things change and strategies change and so forth and offer changes. But anyway, look, I'm with you 100% there. I think there's my business partner will say to me when we're looking at something and having a look at how they're marketing it versus what the product is, and pardon the French, but he'll say shit sells. It does. If you've got the right messaging, you'd be surprised what you can get people to do. So I think absolutely the messaging is key critical component, and particularly for those smaller startup type businesses, small business full stop. If you don't have the right messaging, then cash flow dries and the business dies. It's a simple equation. With the right
Yeah. And
messaging, the point you made about having that opportunity to at least get some clients and understand if they're not even if they're not satisfied, to be able to understand what is important to them, they can iterate. And you might find that in 12 months, 24 months time, a business is entirely different offer to what it was yesterday. I've seen that with a player in our market that virtually started off doing what we're doing, but with AI rather than having real people sitting in there. And then they've completely pivoted to, rather than from a lead gen perspective, completely pivoted to a perspective. And so they've realized that from using AI to engage, we've all heard the thing about AI SDRs and so forth, that there's much more demand from the customer support side with the AI chatbots and so forth. So we've watched that pivot happen over the course of about 4 or 5 months, I think, as they started to hit the market. So it was really interesting to watch that. But that messaging to give the business an opportunity to be able to understand what's important to the customer is critical. I'm with you 100%. I think messaging all day, all night.
Terry, it's also about positioning too, right? Because there's messaging, but there's also it's how you message it, but it's how it's positioned in the market too. At the end of the day, like a Chanel bag is also made in China in the same factory as something that you can get at Walmart, but it has this brand perception, this positioning. And even with chat metrics, there's what you do, and then there's a HubSpot AI chat agent, and it's just a matter of positioning what you do to solve a specific type of issue, because you're not going to get the quality or the conversion rate from an AI chatbot agent sitting on someone's site that you would from a live rep that interacts with you in the moment. And like we had this conversation when we first spoke, people talk like reckless to a chat bot until they realize it's a person. Like I get so much garbage coming through my site and I'll just like type back like a human. They're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize this was like a real thing. So it's helping people to understand like, hey, yes, you can do this automated AI thing and you're going to get this result. And if you want, that's fine. But if you're looking for a conversion here, who really understands your business, someone who's going to be there actually guiding customers through the process, this is where we sit. And that's how you get away from competing with these like other, whether if you're in a saturated market, you don't have to compete with just the cheapest thing.
That's right. That's right. I've got a great idea. Let's turn the next part of this session into a full review and rebuild the Matrix website. No, I've got
Me on the spot.
that would actually be a very good. I think that would be a very good piece of content to go through and record a full breakdown of your process from start to finish as you're doing it live. So we might chat about that later.
Yeah.
No,
And Terry, that's the thing about my process too, is that I take what the business owner or the executives within a company, everything that they've experienced in their business, everything they're hearing from customers, that's the most important part of all of this. And when I'm in a conversation with a founder or CEO, I can pull that out of somebody in a way that you're not going to get from, oh, having ChatGPT write your homepage. There's just something that happens when you're talking to a human and who's asking you pointed questions about the customer journey. Light bulbs are going to come on, and you're going to say, you know what, actually, people have told me this and this problem. I keep hearing this issue. And when I can pull that out of a founder or business owner, that's when really compelling messaging can come from those conversations.
it's interesting. We'll switch topics slightly. We'll start to have a bit of a chat about AI and the current environment. One thing that I am hearing a lot recently is that live chat doesn't work. Live chat just doesn't work. They've tried it. We've tried it. We've had chatbots before. It just doesn't work. $5 billion in pipeline, which is what we've delivered, can't be wrong. So we know it works and we know where it works. And there are some places it doesn't work. But I had an interesting conversation this morning with a chief marketing officer who said that they keep a very close eye on the engagement with their chatbot across their ICP, and their ICP just doesn't engage with chat. It turns out we've got another customer that deals with the same ICP, and they've got a fairly high conversion rate through the live chat. And when I pointed that out, he was a little bit perplexed, and I think he didn't believe me to start with. And I thought, the difference is your experience and with non-engagement is with a chatbot that the very first thing it's asking for is your name and email address. Of course, there's not going to be much engagement with that. If the first experience that you can give, and I said, you should test this, turn the chatbot off and have one of your team sit in there and see what the difference is. I'll have a chat with him tomorrow and see how that ended up. I said it was going to be today, so we'll see how that goes. But that's the type of thing that people don't know what they don't know. And they'll form all of their opinions based on their experience. The idea of messaging is trying to get them to understand that there's another experience that they haven't had yet, and that it's not too far away for them being able to experience that and that new outcome. Yeah, true.
Yeah. And it's also just about marketers always following what the norm is. I would just encourage anybody. So if every company is asking for your email address and your name as the first conversation starter within the chatbot, I like that you suggested, hey, just try this different approach, because unfortunately, a lot of companies just say, this is the standard and how it's done. But then that places a roadblock in getting those conversations started. It limits the lead flow, but no one thinks to just remove that one barrier, because they're like, this is what's done in the industry. If you go to our competitor's website, we need to capture their email. We need to capture their name. But it's putting people off and actually stopping them from engaging in a further conversation that could lead to a sales conversation.
Look, it's even worse than that, because the vendors themselves that sell the software, live chat and chatbot software, actually recommend that's what they do up front to capture it. It's virtually like a form fill. It's what they recommend to do to catch up front. When it's so far away from what actually works, it's not funny. Have empathy for every single marketer out there that's struggling with chatbots at the moment, because they've been told to do that. They look around, everybody else is doing that. It seems like it's the right thing to do, when this is one of those times when everybody's zigging, you should be zagging. And anyway.
Especially when people have become a little bit fatigued with how the sales process has been. And that's why I do predict that things are going to start moving fast, that sales processes are going to start to emulate B2C versus these long drawn out B2B processes. Because how many of us have downloaded an ebook and then all of a sudden we're getting a sales message from a sales rep and it's, wait, what? I don't even remember downloading this, let alone wanting to take a meeting with a rep. When when the prospect or the web visitor is used to the sales process and they're fatigued and they're a little bit jaded, that's when that comes into a place where they're not wanting to enter their name and email because they might just not want to get hit with that message at the moment.
Look, inside, that's this whole piece about the dark funnel. All this research is being done. They're now saying that over 70% of the buyer's journey is complete before they reach out to an organization. And that's why, because we've forced them through our persistent chasing them all over the place, whether it's via email or retargeting them through marketing on Facebook or across their socials when they're relaxing in their spare time. They just get so sick of knowing that if they click on a link, I'm just going to see this everywhere for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Where people avoid it almost at all costs until they're absolutely certain. And by the time that they're clicking contacting a company, they're virtually down to their last 3 on the list. And probably happy to go with either of them. So then it becomes more about their experience that they have on the way through. So we've created the monster. Now we've got to try and deal with it. It was interesting. A very smart marketer said to me that here's a question, Terry. Can you own do you afford, do you have the budget to own 70% of the buyer's journey? And it's, of course not. They're in so many different places, Slack channels or communities or G2 cafeteria, all the other places that they go. You can't be everywhere. And so that's the point now. So you've got to pick the mark, find out the ones that you do want to be involved in and how you're going to be there. And in my mind, it's through messaging and content. The main place. Sure, you can have a few employees stalking some of these Slack groups, but when it's all said and done, it's going to be the overall messaging and word of mouth on referrals is what will make it.
Yeah.
So that brings me to another point. I think there's been a lot of change in the market, particularly I think around this whole messaging and content piece with AI, with budget constraints and even layoffs now and more recently. How are you evolving your business in 25 and through into 26?
Yeah, for me personally, it's been a shift from just marketing myself as a copywriter, the person who delivers the thing, to actually, hey, I'm going to help you with strategy and higher level thinking, right? Because that's really what the robot can't do at this point is have that analytical. It can do strategy, but it's just not going to get the nuances. And I would say that the drawback of relying on AI to do the strategy work is that you're just going to wind up sounding like everyone else. And I think that's the biggest drawback. So AI is going to, I think, allow teams to get leaner, but it can't replace certain functions. And I think as someone who's been doing this since 2019 and saw all of this go down and I'm seeing the way things are going. For me, it's about positioning myself as someone who is not just delivering an order taker, but more involved in higher level strategy and allowing them to execute. Whether you're going to use a bot to do the writing, that core message that you decide on has to be done with a little bit of heart and soul still.
So in essence, what you're saying is that you're taking all of the skills that you used to use to deliver a piece of content now and sharing that across an organization to help them with their overall branding and messaging and positioning in the marketplace.
Exactly. Because something that's really big in content right now is repurposing and taking one piece of content and spinning it out to 50 different pieces of content across a few select platforms, being in different places, showing up, because people need to hear these messages over and over again to actually be sold to. But instead of starting everything from scratch, your best bet is to get the most mileage out of the content that's created. I think that everyone should be doing video right now. And I think repurposing video-based content into text-based content, clip-based content, that's the most efficient way to do that. So the way that I'm approaching companies now is saying, let's get clear on your brand script. What is your message? And that should really start with your homepage on your website. That should be your home base where your message really lives. And then all the content can really stem from that core messaging that you've decided on. And I guess it's your home base where everybody in the company can go to this website and say, oh, this is how we're speaking to people right now. And here's how we can repurpose this message into all these different formats. But when the core message isn't there, that's why companies sound different in different places, or you have people talking about the company in very different ways.
Yes. Yes, just yes. We've started doing exactly that, where now my core content tends to be video, this podcast, in fact, and we'll start to breach out and we'll do a blog and we'll do all the other snippets and social posts. And it's interesting. I hate social media. I just hate it. And really, do we want to be on TikTok? Are any of our clients on TikTok, or potential clients on TikTok? Reality is there's probably more likely that our clients are on TikTok than Facebook or Instagram, quite frankly. That's where my head's at the moment. I think that the way it's been adopted, and there's a little B2B presence now on TikTok. It's interesting. AI helps us, or we spoke there before about some of the tools we use. What's your thoughts on AI copy tool or both?
I think it's both. I think AI is going to become a legitimate threat to every industry, though, whether that's a therapist, a photographer. So if we're talking like ultimate end game, where I see AI going is not in a good direction, because we've gone from technological advances that have helped us with some day-to-day things and making life a bit easier, to now we have this thing that is an existential threat and is going to replace humans in a lot of ways. I think, like, just end game, the majority of the population is going to be unemployed and we are going to be forced to provide universal basic income. I don't think people are going to starve and die, and humanity is going to, I think we're going to not maybe. So the way I see it is that people are going to have their life facilitated to them at a very low cost, because we're going to replace so much human labor that costs a certain amount of money with robots, right? So we will be able to live off of less money. So if you see policy that is pushing universal basic income, it's because we are moving in that direction where the majority of the population is actually going to be out of work. And what society will look like when that happens will be the question. So if we're just going to go way forward, that's where I ultimately see it. But for now, in terms of marketing and AI, it's just making lives easier. It's going to help people do work faster. It's going to allow people to run leaner teams. I think people are going to spin off and do their own things. It's going to be, hey, here's me and my AI, and here's how we're bringing value to the market. That's like the short term. But in terms of where it's going end game, it's going to change everything. It's going to change humanity. But I don't know if we want to get that deep on this. It could be the Antichrist.
Not today, but I think that's actually a very good topic to delve in on another conversation for sure. No doubt, no doubt. I've got some perspectives on that as well. Interesting, interesting. So, look, I'm with you. I think it's both. I in copywriting at the moment is a both facilitator. It can help with a lot of things. Unless you're very careful with it, you do, and you made this point earlier, you will end up sounding just like everybody else. And the reason for that is that AI learns from everything. And so what it puts out is the expected next thing, which will be an average of everything that it's learned. And so unless you can get very good at the prompting, and I'm dabbling around with that a bit myself at the moment, building very specific custom GPTs and bots in part, to deliver very specific outcomes and undertake specific activities. A little bit like your voice of the customer software or bot that we'd be interested to have a conversation with later. I think this whole, I don't think necessarily that it's a new industry called prompt engineer. I don't think there's any such thing. If you really want to get serious about it, the AI can prompt itself. So I think that little wave of prompt engineers came and went very quickly. So
Right. Even from a content perspective, I think a lot of people were freaking out about, do blogs still have a role? What is going to happen to Google and SEO? But ChatGPT is still pulling its results from Google and blog posts that people are writing and videos people are creating. That was like another panic wave that came of, okay, is there a point in writing blogs anymore? But yes, there is. It's just people are going to be consuming it on a different platform. ChatGPT is going to pull it.
and it's interesting that more and more of those blogs that it's consuming are being generated by AI. So I'm really fascinated to see how that goes. I think we'll potentially get to a stage where it'll be so obvious when somebody's written something out of their brain.
Well, and
And their own experiences.
Google is going to penalize blog posts that are 100% AI written if they're nonsensical. But we also have to remember that the algorithm prioritizes what can get the person the best answer to their question. So it's at this point, it can't be just left alone to do its own thing. It needs to start with the human thought, or at least be supervised so that the content is actually getting to the heart of what that person intended when they made the search. What was the search intent?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Christine, look, you've worked through both enterprise, SaaS, and smaller service businesses. What messaging principles apply across both?
I would say simplicity in message is going to be key to both. Like I said before, I think B2B and B2C are they're gonna become more and more intertwined, the way that marketing and the sales process works.
Mm.
And I think that at the end of the day, whether you're selling to a business or to a consumer, they're both driven by the same thing, which is emotion, right? Speaking to pain points and problems and desires of the person, even in a B2B selling process or marketing, is always going to be relevant.
Okay. It's interesting. I've always been of the opinion that even though we're selling business to business, it still is actually human to human, like it's person to person. And so, sure, there might be a slightly different buying process to like a typical e-commerce brand. You click on a basket and check out a pair of shorts or t-shirt, and it's paid for and delivered in a couple of days. It might be a longer process because of the more complexity potentially in the sale, in that there's other factors, other people that need to be involved in the decision, or that might need to assess the product in terms of really solving their part of the problem. Sometimes the problem is shared by more than one person for more than one across more than one reason. So I get it that it can be a little bit more complex that way, but I've always felt it is still person to person. One of the early, when they first brought out this idea of the challenger sale, I remember going through a fairly intensive training program and thinking to myself, look, I get the idea in terms of trusted advisor, but I don't think that's new. I've been in the field of sales and marketing, business management, distribution for 10 years before that. And it was like this trusted advisor and being able to actually bring new insights and challenge. It was, how do you bring value to a client? You can show them a different way of thinking about things or bring them some information that they didn't know about. I know that's just not, that's what all that challenger sale is about. But for me, that was the core concept of it. It was interesting that I think the fundamental underlying psychology doesn't change. We all make decisions based on emotions because we're making them based on a self-centered perspective of what it means for us. Then we'll go forward and justify it with logic. And
Yep.
regardless of how much we'd like to say, this has been a logical decision, here's all the numbers. When it's all said and done, we've made that decision before we've started pen to paper on the numbers, quite frankly.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. We justify with logic after the fact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For a founder or marketing lead listening today, what's one high leverage change that they can make to increase conversions fast?
I would go into the sales demos, whatever you have recorded, the chat bot, wherever that repository sits, and literally create a voice of customer document. Understand how people are articulating their problems, what ways are they phrasing their problems, what words are they using, and start weaving that into your messaging. And you will see whether it's an increased open rate in your email marketing campaigns or an increased conversion on your landing pages. You will see that because it's just a matter of, did that message hit or not? Did it drive them to the outcome or not? And when you can talk to people in the way that they actually speak about their problems, you will break through the noise because, again, there's a lot of generic messaging and a lot of we do this, we do that, choose us. But when somebody hears their problem articulated in the way that they talk about it, it cuts through the noise. I know saying cuts through the noise is like very marketing jargon, but really, like, when we think of somebody who's getting 200 notifications per day and what messages actually capture our attention and get us to click, when you can get close to that, you will see results immediately, even if it's a little bit of an uptick.
Because they feel heard. You get them. You understand
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah.
That'll always get them interested to continue the conversation. A quick question back on AI again. How are you using AI in your own business right now? Is there any sort of cool use cases that our audience might not have thought of or not be aware of?
Yeah, so I sell information products. That's the other side of my business. So I use a lot of custom GPTs, and because I use a chatbot and because I'm getting inbound leads on my website, I'm answering very similar questions. And what I'll do is I have a customer service custom GPT, and basically I will feed the inbound inquiry into this custom GPT and it spits out an answer. It has to be supervised by me. But what I think I would say the value proposition or why it's worth it for me is that the GPT knows my positioning. It knows how I like to answer questions. It knows the ins and outs of my product so that that question or sorry, when that answer is delivered, it not only takes the person into account and what they said, but it answers it from my vantage point, right? Because that customization, that level of personalization is needed. And that's what the custom GPT can help me at least save time drafting those messages. Voice of customer, I'm not doing that with my own custom GPT. I'm trialing, I can say their name. They're called On Target AI. They have a waiting list. I'm one of their beta trial users. That has been a really cool tool because if you have reviews on Google or Capterra or G2, it compiles all of that into something that's actually very similar to the brand script that I create. So that's a really cool tool. And then in terms of just everyday life, I'm using AI even for my weight loss journey. I'm literally using it as a therapist. And that's why I literally say it's coming for every role, because when I have a hunger craving and I want to go and go off of my diet, instead of going to do that, I will go back and forth with the robot and it will remind me of my goals and do that cognitive behavioral therapy. So I use it for so many things. The business is obviously just one part of my life.
Interesting. Since we've been able to talk to ChatGPT, I must admit I've had some pretty interesting conversations myself on the weekend while I've been walking. In fact, come up with an entirely new product and new offer on our walk and chat. We've
Yes, just to have that.
like,
Yeah, to have that sounding board and like you as a human being able to talk to it and have it repeat things back is really interesting. The one thing I wouldn't recommend that everyone's doing right now is having ChatGPT turn a photo of your pet into a human. It's like what your dog looks like as a human. And it's very disturbing. So if anyone's listening, don't drive. I don't want to know what my adorable dog looks like as a grown man.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. So you did say don't do that. Disturbing.
It's very disturbing. It'll tell you, okay, I'm going to capture your animal's essence and show you what it would look like as a human. And it's really weird.
That's one of those terrible curiosity things that I'm probably going to have to do as soon as we finish this call. Just,
Yeah, if you have a cat, well,
oh my goodness. So I've got, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have that you'd like to mention?
I feel like we covered a lot. We
Mm.
covered a lot. It's just messaging, AI, and if anyone, I would say just as a call to action, if anyone feels like, hey, I know what we do is really great and I have great results, but for some reason leads aren't converting and we're not articulating what we're doing, I would say, even if you don't hire me, have an outside person come into your business and actually get to the root of what makes you unique, what makes you effective, and articulate it in a way that resonates with the target customer. If you can find someone to bridge that gap, it can solve a lot of lead problems.
I can sit here and say from personal experience that that is so difficult to do as a founder in a business, a co-founder, a CEO. You're sitting in here, it's the old classic saying of not being able to see the forest for the trees.
Yes.
I've been studying a bit of copywriting over the last 18 months and wrote my first ad back in 1994. So I've had a bit of experience. I'm sitting here and in this conversation we've had, I realised that I've just gone too far down the quirky intrigue side with the heading, and it's just completely at a position where now I need to go back and start from scratch again almost. And so I think that advice in terms of finding somebody external to have a look at it can help just bring you back down. And I think the single message that's been running through here has been the keeping it simple, the communication simple, making sure it's very easy for people to understand what the message is. So I've got one last question. Is there one belief or lesson that you wish every marketer understood about copy and conversation?
I would just say, I guess the first thing that came to my mind was like, leave your assumptions at the door, your biases, right? I think that's the hardest part about being in marketing is that we do tend to come to the table thinking, no, I know this is what they want. I know this is the message that will hit. And that's where the data really comes in to show you, like, no, that's actually not what they want. And it can be really hard, especially the closer you are or the more work you've put into a campaign. And then you find out, oh, that's not actually what it was. So I would say just hold on to your own ideas and assumptions loosely. Don't get too attached because the simple message or the message that you don't think sounds right could be what resonates. And you just have to be open to that possibility. That's what I have found. And that is really hard to do when it's your own baby, when it's your own product. So that's where that kind of having someone, whether it's a marketer or whatever, come in and say, no, this is actually what's going to convert can be really helpful.
What are you talking about? Nobody knows my business like I know my business. Christine, please don't be so offensive.
I hear it a lot.
I get it. I get it. I get it. Yeah, it's been a good conversation. Are you reading or have read any good books that you would recommend?
Let's see. I'll tell you one book that's in my shopping cart. It's The Dip by Seth Godin. I like his work on marketing. He has a book called This Is Marketing that I really liked. And his newest work is called The Dip. And it's basically about like when to give up because you failed versus when do you just have to get over this hump. So that's on my reading list. There is a book called like The Wealthy Consultant. I forget the guy's name, but he has a podcast and he's really good. So I've been reading that. What else? Yeah, I try to do my reading more just on an entertainment and personal things that I'm interested outside.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if you want to not think about marketing and sales and business, Bill O'Reilly has what's called the Killing series. So it's like killing Kennedy, killing the witches, killing Jesus. And he talks about these historical events, but he's such a good writer that he'll take like a dry historical event and make it sound like a thriller. So his storytelling ability is unmatched. I would just recommend anybody read his books. Killing the Witches, about the Salem witch trials, and Killing Jesus are like my two top books of this year. So
No,
good.
no, that's a great recommendation. I'll check that one out myself.
Yeah, good
And Seth
read.
Godin, he's a favourite of mine, a Purple Cow. I haven't read The Dip actually, so I'll jump into that now.
And reading a story brand by Donald Miller is always going to be like what tends to be that book that people say, oh, that's on my bookshelf, but I haven't read it. But once you do read it, it changes everything. There's also a book called They Ask, You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. He's actually a big voice on LinkedIn. He has a lot of really great opinions, but my whole basis of content marketing came from that book. So in terms of what to create in terms of content from a marketing perspective, that book is absolute gold. It's the classic.
That's the They Ask You Answer.
Yeah,
Look, I've got to say, the Story Brand book, I read that and it did change me, and I got all inspired and started to work through the worksheet, the workbook, and everything. And then life happens. And I've literally been back to it probably 5 times and still haven't been able to get it to a point where I can get to the end and then use that to formulate the content on the website. It's been quite frustrating actually, and it's something that I started about 3 years ago. And the hard part I'm finding is that every time I go back to it, I almost have to go back to the beginning again to refresh myself of what we've been through all the way through. It's something that you do really need to be pretty consistent on. Look, and I'd say if there's anyone out there listening that's considering going through this process, beware, that is the challenge. You really want to have someone like Christine come in that can go along and complete that journey for you in one go, as opposed to getting stop and start, as I have for sure. So good. Thank you today, Christine. It's been an excellent conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I think that the audience will have some really good takeaways, particularly around the requirements for simplicity. And the big one for me is just stepping out of the forest, being able to see the forest for the trees. It's probably the single biggest message in here. I got wrapped up, guilty as charged. I got so wrapped up in it myself. I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I'm actually embarrassed by the website at the moment. So go looking at chatmetrics.com for a moment, or maybe by the time this is published, it'll be okay. Actually, I'm going to have to make a commitment now. By the time this is published, my website will be okay. Go and have a look at it.
good. For sure.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for joining us today on the chat.
Thank you so much.